I just want to say hi to everyone that's watching. I have Richard Suttles with me, also called the Faithiest Atheist. My name's Tim Johnson. I'm a Ratio Christi chapter director here in Fort Worth at Tarrant County College South Campus. So, anyways, I've gotten to know Richard kind of through interaction through Facebook, joking around, interacting with him there. So what we're going to start with, we're just going to ask Richard a few questions. He can ask me a few questions. Kind of just a casual dialogue, just having fun conversation. I mean, I'm sure maybe as we get to know each other in the future, we'll have more in-depth conversations. So Richard, the number one thing when I was telling about people about this interview, I told them I'm talking to a gentleman who calls himself the Faithiest Atheist. And I love to see people's face reactions because they don't know what to think of it. So kind of tell us a little bit about that. How did you come up with that moniker? What was your kind of like journey toward being the Faithiest Atheist?
Yeah, when I decided that I wanted to do some sort of atheist, I want to say the word ministry. When I decided I wanted to do that, I didn't want to come across like a lot of atheists that I see uh, that say, okay, everything's all figured out. It's all the science is in, religion's over. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to come across as like we have doubts too. We have some of the same challenges that religious people have. So I wanted a name that was like the weak atheist or the maybe atheist or something like that. And at one of my conversations, someone said, you have faith too, and I was like, yeah, we do. We have faith as well. And I said, I'm pretty faithy. And then someone was like, well, I'm more faithy than you. And I'm like, well, I'm the faithiest. And then I realized that rhymed. So I came up with that. I thought that was a good name. I did realize once I officially became a thing and started making the rounds, someone sent me a book called, I think it was Faithyism, something like that. So there was another atheist that had come up with the name, a similar name to that. And he had, his thing was, okay, I'm a non-believer, but I can still be friends with religious people. So a very similar message to me. So if you guys ever see a book called Faithiest or Faithyism, something like that, it's not me, but it's the same kind of theme.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So, like, from what I understand and when I've watched your past interviews, at one time you were what people would say Christian.
Right.
So what was your journey from Christianity to atheism, if you don't mind me asking, if you could share a little bit of that?
Sure. Yeah. I was raised Southern Baptist in a small town in Georgia and in middle Georgia. I was raised in the same church that my mom was raised in, and they were great. Really nice church. I would say I started having questions as a teenager and wasn't quite sure. Some of the verses that they hadn't really gone over with us in Bible school. Uh, they want us to read the Bible. Once we get older, they want us to read the Bible, cover to cover. And in short order, I had verses that just wasn't matching with God as he had been described to me. Um, that part was one thing, but then I noticed that the answers that they gave were really weird because sometimes one guy's answer was different than another guy's answer. And it didn't bother them when I said, well, he says this. And they're like, oh, well, it's how it is. And then I'm like, well, what's the answer? Because it's not like that with math. If I ask two different strangers a math question, they, will both say the same answer. Maybe there's different algorithms that get there, but, I was like, is this like math or is it not? Then my youth pastor gave me an apologetics book, and he didn't know what apologetics was. So back in like the 1980s, nobody really knew what apologetics was. And in fact, the kind of Christianity that I was raised on is, the Bible's true because it's true. And if you don't believe that, then what's wrong with you? Because the Bible's true. So apologetics is the idea of like reasoning. The church, well, I'd say a lot of people in church, I don't think this was a church position, but a lot of people in the church were like, if you start thinking about it, you're going to talk yourself out of it. And you don't want to do that. And again, as well-meaning, it's not like they were closed-minded and happy with that. It's just, that's how they were raised. The guy who told me that, not too long ago said, that's how I was raised too. I was taught the same way. And, so of course we're raised a certain way. We're going to grow up and teach the kids the same thing. And he was like, for better or for worse, that's how that was. So yeah, there was questions and I wasn't getting good answers. And it began to occur to me that maybe Christianity is something that's subjective, that people just kind of come up with how they see it. And then at some point they just say, this is Christianity. And that would explain for me, that would explain the conflict and that would explain the confusion and some of the contradictions, or at least between Christians. And so I said, okay, so this is something that's not really a real thing. It's just what people, again, this was my view of saying this. This is just something that people do And so from that, I sort of walked away. It wasn't easy. I would say from my late teenage years to my early 20s was like several years where I, slowly and slowly began to let go of it.
Okay. I can kind of relate to you on that. I grew up in a similar environment where
Mhm.
they weren't like, you couldn't question anything, but I didn't have no idea there was even such thing as apologetics when I was younger.
Right.
And I grew up independent fundamentalist, not so much Southern Baptist. So, you know, KJV only.
Right.
I'm not bashing that. My church uses the KJV. So, that's fine. But, they weren't against like evidential arguments, but I grew up where I wasn't really taught why I believe what I believe so much. They weren't like you need to believe this or you don't have faith, but I never really heard a whole lot of evidential arguments either. Definitely not on the like logic side or any philosophical aspects of things. So, I mean, just to share a little bit of my journey here, I had kind of a crisis in faith to some extent as well. I was a youth pastor at a young age, and I understood what Jesus said, a prophet's not honored in his own country.
Mhm.
Because, I grew up in this church and all of a sudden people were trying to kind of tell you how to do your job. You should do this, you should do that. And people would go to my wife and say, well, he's called to ministry, so you should be doing this too. They were well meaning. They weren't trying to be mean or gossipy or anything, but it kind of got on my nerves. And at the same time, we finally had our first kid, and I got distracted with finances and kind of burned out. And I kind
Mhm.
of walked away for an extended period of time. I would try and start up at another church, and I still just, it was more of an emotional thing, I suppose, than a
Mhm.
logical thing. And so there was a period when I started working for small city where nearly 5, 6 years I had nothing to do with church. I was kind of burnt out. I really didn't know why I believed what I believed. Uh, something went and I guess because I grew up in it, something wouldn't let me like go full bore atheist either.
Mhm.
But I was definitely in a place where I was like, yeah, I don't know if Christianity is true. Why do we believe this? Why do we believe that? And so that was kind of my path toward apologetics. And I'm still kind of new to the field, but I can relate to you in some aspects of that. I kind of get where you're coming from. Not saying we're exactly the same, obviously, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely something within the Christian community where they're not as educated as they should be about why they believe things. And then there's some that are just, if I say this word correctly, fideist. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Is it
Or is
Fideist? I
yeah,
don't remember.
fideist.
Yeah.
I never know how to pronounce some of these words
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
where they're just like faith without evidence. And if you try to bring any evidence in, then you don't have faith. And I think that's a bunch of
Right.
bull.
Now,
So
I would just say, atheists have some of that too. There's atheists who say, Richard Dawkins is right because Richard Dawkins is right, or science is right because science is right.
yeah,
So there's sometimes our brains take shortcuts naturally, and
right.
we develop things that we just see as ultimately trustworthy. So, one of my big things to say is that if you're religious and you see some religious people behaving in a way that you don't think is um, responsible, trust me, there's people over on our side that are doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that's just a natural human condition across the board, whether you're
Yes.
Hindu, Buddhist, whatever.
Yep.
There's always that inclination to be that way. It's just kind of part of our nature, I think.
Right.
And I think it's important to recognize that, especially when you start trying to call people hypocrites and whatnot. I think you need to
Yes.
kind of stop and self-examine for a little bit because
Right.
one of the things I talk to other atheists about when they bring up hypocrisy, I'm like, well, let's stop and look at our lives. How many times do you need to practice hypocrisy to be a hypocrite? And have you ever practiced hypocrisy in your life?
Right.
And some will stop and think about it for a minute. Like, okay, I see your point there.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear some from our side are willing to do that.
Yeah. then, I've had interactions with both, with Christians being this way too. They just start name calling you. Well, you're not a real Christian because all this blah, blah, blah. Or you come across atheists and you probably atheists yell at you too, well, you're not
Big
a real
time.
atheist,
Oh, I get that. Well,
how
and
dare you?
plus, well, two things. A, I'm really nice to a lot of Christians, so I get that I'm not a real atheist. I get that accusation a lot. But also, technically, you could really technically accuse me of not being a real atheist, because I guess when the word atheism first came to be, they were saying there's no gods. Stop the God talk. Whereas I'm like, I don't know. I can't take you to where no gods would be and say, aha, see, there's no gods. So I
Yeah.
don't go that far with it. So you could say agnostic. I've our friend Kurt Jarris would say even deist, because there's times when I'm like, is there? No, or is there? So I'm kind of like that doubt sometimes, and maybe I might even dip my toe over there. Maybe there's something. So he's like, you're more of a deist than you are an agnostic. But none of that bothers me, because my thing is, I think that our religions are of human origin. And so if an atheist says, if you think that Christianity is made up and not bestowed upon us from above, then you can come in. We'll let you in. So that's how I get away with the atheist part.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about Kurt for a little bit, but
Please, a whole hour of bashing Kurt Jarris would be a great show. Just kidding.
But cool. Well, also, I like kind of just talk about like your experience with the military a little bit. Has that played into kind of your worldview? Has that shaped some things?
Yes, big, huge time. So yeah, I'm in the Marines for 10 years. So a lot of my 20s were part of the Marines. Some of my 30s were in the Marines, and by then I was already thinking that this was something that we kind of make up. And then plus add to that, I work in counterterrorism. And so even though I got out of the Marines 20 years ago now, I can't believe it. I've been in the counterterrorism world for 30 years. And so for 30 years, I studied counterterrorism, and that has played a huge role in my worldview, because I spend 16 hours a day reading the worst of the worst of people justifying. The interesting thing about terrorism is that they don't see it like robbing a bank. They see it as righteous. So like a bank robber will hide that he's a bank robber, but a terrorist can't help it. They're always constantly saying, this needs to be done. I need to explain to the world how important this is. And they write their justification, and they have these, memos and entire volumes and long videos justifying why they do it. That's what I specialize in. I specialize in listening to that. And that has played a huge role. So I've had some really wise apologists say, well, that's why you're like this. It's because you're biased, because you're surrounded in that, I want to say filth, but it's human nature, but it's a dark aspect of human nature. And they're like, you're so inundated by that darkness that you've applied it to everything. And that's why you're like this. That's probably a fair assessment.
Okay. Well, I do appreciate you serving us and, doing what you do. And I don't want to ever people make light of that. And I could understand I cannot understand. Let me clarify. I haven't had the experiences you have and seen what you have. So I wouldn't be too hard on you on that one. I can only imagine what you've seen and don't know if I would really want to know. But
right. It's better to not know.
Yeah. So, but just thank you for your service on that.
Sure.
And so one of the things I think is pretty neat, just kind of learning about you, and you hear background noise because my wife just came in the door. So
okay, yeah, I get that too. I've got a dog, family. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So you'll hear a sorry in the recording now, people, as you everything. But told her I should make her say hi right now, but she would probably hit me for doing that. So, anyways,
well, we should tell your viewers I'm going to be there in a couple of months, right?
Right.
Yeah. So whoever wants to meet me, I'll be there.
Right. We're going to be doing that in October for sure now. So my chapter, and we invited the Dallas Baptist chapter to attend too.
Nice. Okay.
So anyways, but one of the things I think is cool about you work with other apologists at conferences. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience, how you got started on that, and who you've got to work with and so forth, and how do you feel about that and everything? How does that work?
My biggest thing, remember I was raised Southern Baptist, and so I still, that mindset is still kind of with me. And the kind of Southern Baptists that raised me were like, let's go meet other people who don't believe what we believe. And instead of preach at them, listen to them and engage with them and learn their language and their mindset. So that's always been a huge role for me. So even before I got into this, we would appreciate like the Mormons. We live in an area where it's almost all entirely Latter-day Saints. So when they come to our door, we let them in, we feed them, we listen to them. They talk about how they do that. So that mindset has never left me. And so when I realized if I really wanted to be a different kind of atheist, and again, I'm going to say ministry, I know that's totally a religious term, but
Right.
I was like, I want to engage with other apologists and other churches. So I just started doing that. Like if there was a local church doing something, I would go and just sit and behave myself. And, and I'd done that anyway. If anyone ever invited me, I would go and listen and not scream, scream at them and just listen, bring my Bible. I still have my Bible. And so what happened was at one particular apologetics event, Eric Hernandez was there. And I walked in with him and Greg Kokel and Frank Turek were speaking. And as soon as I walked into the church, this was in Jacksonville, Texas, by the way, Pastor Mike Miller is the big guy there in Jacksonville, Texas. As soon as I walked in, I just saw they needed help. They just needed another guy. And the Southern Baptist and the Marine and me kicked in, and I started helping him. And then I'm thinking, Greg and Frank and Eric, they want to talk, and the pastor, Leighton Flowers, they want to talk, intellectual stuff. They don't want to, an atheist messing with them. So I just started helping. And then at the end of all that, Eric was like, "You work for me now," because he was like, "Here's what we need." He's like, "We need somebody who, when we walk in the door, isn't trying to meet up with Greg and Frank. They're trying to help, and so we need more like that." So it was really that. It wasn't really like it would be cool to tell people that you're not a believer. It's really like we need guys who can, I want to say be guys, but I don't mean that insulting, but guys who can just take care of things. So for that reason, I started doing that. So when they do conferences, I'll go and help. And in those occasions, I might not even speak as an atheist. I might just be there to help and keep my mouth shut and my head down and just work. It does end up usually that someone will ask me to speak because I'm pretty well known now. And then on top of that, there's several Christian organizations who hire me to go around and speak to groups, usually youth groups, because they know that I'll give my view, but at the same time, I won't scream at them. And they also know that if like one of the kids brings up a good point, that I'll be like, "Oh yeah, that's a good point," and then I won't keep arguing. I'll let it in there. And so they're like, the kids need that. And then sometimes there's adults who need that too. And sometimes there's churches that's like, we want to have a debate. So like, for instance, I'm having a couple of debates coming up in October. And one of them is right before I come to see you guys. I'm just debating at a local church down the street and in front of their congregation because the pastor's like, they need to see a Christian scholar. In fact, is a Ratio Christi guy, James Umber. I don't know if you know.
The name sounds familiar. I have to look him up.
He's at ASU. So the Ratio Christi director at ASU is named James Umber. And so I'll be debating with him, and the pastor's like, I just want them to see that a Christian scholar and an atheist. Well, so I'm a scholar in radicalization, not really a scholar in atheism, but I want to see them argue, but not scream at each other, and just have a respectful debate and be willing to concede each other's points. So there's several organizations and churches now I've done this enough. Well, they're hiring me to come and do something like that. So I've got that going on. And then plus I'm helping Eric. And for that matter, by this point, there's been a couple of other groups like that too. That's just like, hey, we could use your help, sort of an unofficial capacity. So all of that going together, it's kind of a second time job for me to go and share what I believe. And also listen, I mean, I've been doing this for a few years now, and I don't believe exactly the same that I believed 3 years ago. So in that respect, a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing back from you guys is changing how I see things.
Yeah, I think one of the important things about what you were talking, we shouldn't be afraid to talk to each other.
Right.
I think sometimes we have these stereotypes in our head where, oh no, they're atheists, so they just must be a jerk and they're going to yell at me and everything. And they're going to say, you're stupid for believing God and you're dumb. And I'm sure there's atheists on the other side who are like, oh, as a Christian, all he's going to do is yell and preach at me saying you're going to hell and hit me over the head with the Bible. And they don't want to hear about science and all that junk.
Right.
And I think one of the purposes why I wanted to have this interview, one, I just wanted to get to know you because, it's been fun kind of goofing off back and forth on Facebook.
That has been fun.
Yeah. And two, just like show people we're both just human beings, you know?
Yes.
We're not some kind of monster on the other's end, hiding under someone's bed, ready to get you or anything yet, or throw gotcha questions. You know, we're both trying to make our way through this life and figure stuff out. I mean, we're all trying to do that. We come
Yes.
to different conclusions, you know, yeah. I mean, as a Christian, I believe my worldview is correct, you know, but at the same time, I'm not going to flaunt in someone's face and say, well, you're just stupid for not believing what I believe. Uh, I've kind of gotten tired of that. I've come across Christians with that mindset where they don't, when if you mention having a conversation with an atheist and, oh goodness, you didn't bring up the gospel presentation within 5 minutes of the conversation, you have failed. You know, you have brought dishonor to our denomination. How dare you?
Yes.
And I guess I just gotten plain sick of that mindset. And I just want to go out and get to know people. Um, this past month I got to go to Utah,
Oh
interact
yeah,
with a
that's right.
lot, interact with a
LDS.
lot of LDS people, and just have
Yeah.
some great conversations. And yeah,
Yeah.
the conversations came to our worldview, and of course, being a Christian and sincerely believing what I believe, yeah, I wanted to convince them about what I perceive as biblical Christianity.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I'm not going to just start yelling and preaching at them. And me, I like this kind of dialogue. I do like to argue,
Right.
but I've learned, kind of like you have, that I think more gets accomplished through conversations like these. I'm not against formal debates,
Hmm.
but part of me, I've watched a whole bunch of them, and to kind of get this mind frame of us versus them.
Yes.
That's why I'm not a big fan of the word debate anymore.
Right.
And I don't see a whole lot of them as much as I used to.
Right.
They're more turning into what we're doing now, just talking.
Right.
So I think that's pretty cool.
Well, I think it's getting better. As it's also in some ways getting less popular, but I'd rather it be less popular than, like for instance, there was that big debate between James Tour and Professor Dave either last year or the year before, and they
Yeah.
were just awful. It was screaming and yelling, but everybody's seen it. So as I travel the country and talk to people, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I saw that debate." But then I'm like, right after that, I did a debate with another debate with a Ratio Christi scholar. Never saw it. Well, here's the link. Yeah, it's okay. Did you guys scream at each other? No, it was actually very friendly. Oh, okay.
Right.
So actually, I'm okay with that. I'd rather be in an unpopular, friendly discussion than a discussion that everybody heard and one or more of us lost our temper.
Yeah. I don't think really much gets accomplished with that. It just kind of
Right.
more reinforces the divide, and where people just don't want to take the time to, reach out and
Yeah.
actually talk to someone. So that just irritates the life out of me.
Right. I get it.
And so I guess, what are, you got to work with a lot of different apologists. Some I'm kind of jealous with.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I
I,
have. Yeah.
I've got to watch Melissa Doherty, and I
Oh,
thought that
good.
was pretty cool. I've been a follower of hers for a while. Okay, clarify, not like a follower as
Right. I
follower of
understand.
Jesus.
Right. I
Let
understand.
me clarify this.
I understand.
I don't see other apologists as like some kind of awesome celebrity, but I
Right.
do have like mad respects, and it'd be kind of cool to meet him one day.
Yes.
Uh, I've gotten to meet Tim Barnett, talk with him a little bit. He's pretty
Me too.
cool.
Yeah. I like him.
I made a joke at Kurt that it's like, why are so many apologists like bald and have goatees? Is that like a trend going on here? I want to keep my hair.
Right.
So,
It works out. I'm losing mine, so
oh, sorry.
hey, it happens. 53. What are you gonna do?
Right.
But yeah, that looks really good for Tim Barnett. The
Yeah.
bald with the goatee, it works. With the
See,
beard, maybe.
I'm too short. I don't think I can pull it off, and I would need to
Right.
get skinnier.
Well, when you hang out with Tim Barnett, everybody's short.
Right.
He's objectively tall.
Yeah. I have a picture with him, and I just look at myself like, man, he's like a giant or something. What is
He,
up?
he really is.
So,
And Melissa Doherty, we both gave a brief. So Stand to Reason did a youth group just a few months ago. Was it the beginning of the summer? The beginning of the summer. Was it maybe May? So it could have been summer. But Stand to Reason did a youth group here in Arizona. And Melissa Doherty spoke to him in the morning, and then I spoke to him in the evening. However, she and I didn't know that we were both going to speak. And if we had known, we would have probably attended each other's meetings just to finally say, because we know of each other and we talk on Facebook. But yeah, I'm sorry that I missed that, because I really like her work as well.
Yeah, she was in Texas recently,
Yep.
attending an interesting conference.
Right.
I'm not going to. Yeah.
We'll have to say who it is, because it's a different. I want to say a different kind of Christianity, but it's definitely.
Yeah.
It's definitely something where she was not there to worship; she was there to listen and learn how a different approach to Christianity.
I'm tempted to mention names myself, but I'm just kind of going to leave it alone.
Yeah,
I do like her satire at times. That's pretty cool.
She's very talented with her video clips. Yep,
yeah.
Much.
So I don't think I could ever pull that off very well. I'd have too much of a dry sense of humor from what I've been told. People are like, I don't know if you're joking or not sometimes.
That might be for the best, though.
Yeah. But the problem is, if you tell me that, you're just going to motivate me to do it more often.
Yeah.
So that's not really the best thing to tell me.
Okay.
My wife often has to like let people know I'm joking. You know, she knows now. Earlier in our marriage, she couldn't tell either, but now she knows with my sarcasm and everything. So people will look at her. She goes, "Yeah, he's just messing with you there."
That's a gift right there. It's a gift to have somebody like that.
Yeah. So she's kind of like my translator at some times, by my side, ensuring people he's just messing with you. He's just joking. He's not being serious or anything. So,